to follow the trajectory then of this course, then, the first week that we were together, we talked about continental rationalism. The second week that we were together, we talked about British empiricism. And tonight we're talking about the French and German Enlightenment. Let's just unpack those briefly and make sure that we understand what it is that we're talking about. We're talking about the difference between the continent and British. The continent, of course, is what was happening on Europe, on the continent of Europe. So in Europe, we were emphasizing rationalism or reason. We were closing off our senses. Even if you close your eyes and close your ears and don't take in anything through your senses, you can still think about God. There was people like René Descartes. How did he know that he existed or that he exists? He said, I think, therefore I am. Even if I close my eyes and don't hear or see anything, I know that I exist, because if I think, or if I doubt, or if I understand, or I, whatever word you want to fill in the blank, if I do something, then I must exist. So rationalism was in the head. It was just us thinking and using reason. What's the difference between rationalism and empiricism? With rationalism, we close our eyes and our ears and we just think. Is that how empiricism is? Empiricism is just the opposite. Empiricism says that everything that we know comes to us through the senses. So there are no innate ideas. You weren't born knowing anything. You were born a tabula rasa. You were born a blank slate. And then beginning on the day of your birth, you started taking in information from the outside world. And that was how you learned and got all the ideas that you currently have. Everything comes from your senses. All of your knowledge comes from your senses. That's empiricism. And we located that on the British Isles, in England and in Scotland, with people like Locke and Hume. This evening, then, we're switching to the French and the German Enlightenments. So let's begin first with the French Enlightenment, and then we'll conclude this course with the German Enlightenment. The French Enlightenment is often characterized by destructive criticism and outspoken hostility toward religion and toward the Catholic Church. So our philosophers are going to be nice to the Church? Quite the contrary. So they're going to be very critical of religion and very critical of the Church, seeing the Church as very authoritarian and not having anything to do with reason. It's a matter of perspective, though, because some people could look at the French Enlightenment and say that the French Enlightenment was this group of impious, of irreligious people who were destructive. Other people would say, you know what, they were a group of progressive people who were trying to liberate people from things like superstition and from the hierarchy of the church, right? We learned so much in that course on medieval and modern church history of how the church seemed to have gone astray. Now there were simply philosophers who were pointing out how it was that the church went astray, and how it was that the people in the church were trying to maintain their power by propagating certain beliefs that may not be reasonable. All the philosophers regarded as typical representatives of the French Enlightenment were opposed in varying degrees to the domination of the church. Remember, this was during the time period when we had to decide who are you siding with. If you're Roman Catholic, are you an ultramontane, meaning are you one of those people who supports that guy, the Pope, on the other side of the mountains? Those were the ultramontanes. They were faithful to the Pope on the other side of the mountains. And then there were the others of us who were advocating for national churches or local churches, right? How it was that the Pope is just one bishop, the Bishop of the Church of Rome. But here in France, or here in Spain, or here in England, we also have our national churches. So in many ways, the philosophers were opposed to the domination of the church and to the hierarchy of the church. And they saw the church and religion, think about this for a moment, this is quite a critique. Religion was the product of ignorance and fear. Why are you Catholic? I'll tell you why you're Catholic. Either because you're ignorant, you don't know better, ouch, or because you're afraid. You're afraid you go to hell, right? Isn't that why you go to Mass on Sunday? So that's how the philosophers of the French Enlightenment were looking at the situation. If you are a religious person, it's for one of two reasons. Either you're ignorant, you're just plain stupid, or you're fearful of things like going to hell. right?
Okay.
They also saw the church as the enemy of intellectual progress. Just think about it for a moment. I mean, the church is a large system. How many Catholics are there in the world today? Well over 1 billion. There are over 1 billion just in the Roman Church alone. In the Orthodox Catholic Church, over 300 million. That's already, we're already up to 1.3 billion people, without counting all the independent Catholic churches in the world. That's a lot of people. When you have systems that large, it's hard to turn those systems, which is why Pope Francis is so radical, right? He's taking the system of 1 billion people and actually starting to turn the ship a bit. Back in this time period, there were a lot of people who didn't want the ship to turn, right? We were going to keep going the same, maintaining the course. And they also thought that religion was prejudicial to true morality. Let's say, what should we base our morality on? Should we base our morality on the Bible? Or should all of us think together about these things and what is good and right and just? Think about it, which is better? Isn't it better for us to talk about these things? Or is it better for us to turn to a book that was written? There's a popular song by Macklemore out here a few months ago talking about how it was that we turned to a book written 2,500 years ago. Okay? Ask yourselves that question. Where should we be getting the rules that we should be following today? From a book written 2,500 years ago? Or should we just all sit around the table and talk about, okay, how can we come up with the rules for how we're going to live today? So philosophers, especially these philosophers of the French and German Enlightenment, had a problem with the church. And just by the fact that we call this the Enlightenment, what does it presume? It presumes that there were some institutions, like the church, who are still living in the Dark Ages, you might say. That's quite a condemnation of the church. 18th century French philosophers were largely influenced by English thought. So again, that's why we're studying this course in this order. We started with the Rationalists, those who appealed to reason on the continent in places like France and Germany and Holland. Then we went across to Britain, England, and to Scotland, where we talked about empiricism, because now this group of French and German Enlightenment thinkers are going to be largely appealing to the British empiricists. And so they're going to look to people like John Locke, if we remember that name from last week. John Locke was one of the British empiricists, the father of British empiricism. They're going to look at people like Isaac Newton. Remember, wasn't it great? Newton was looking at the natural world and seeing all these laws at work. And suddenly we started asking ourselves, instead of believing what the church has taught us all this time, it seems that we could learn a lot more about this world. Modern science can tell us a lot more about the world than the Bible. And so during this Enlightenment, they wanted to develop, as part of the Enlightenment then, the science of the human person, to use Hume's word. Hume talked about the science of man. So we want to develop the science of the human person in the same way that we were developing the science of the universe. Newton was developing the science of the universe, how the universe works. Wouldn't it be something if we could develop the science of the human person, how the human person works? That was the goal of many Enlightenment thinkers. During this time period then, what we're going to do is we're going to see the separation of ethics from metaphysics and theology. Let's take a look at those three words and make sure that we understand them. What is ethics then? We had a course in ethics. Ethics is the study of what's right and wrong, good and bad. Okay, that's the study of ethics. We're going to separate ethics from metaphysics and also from theology. Let's start with theology first. I have a feeling that we might have a better idea of what theology is. What is theology? Anytime we see a word that ends with ology, we know it's the study of something. What is theology the study of? Theos is a Greek word for God. Theology is the study of God. Okay? So we're going to separate ethics from theology. Those of you who believe in God, if there's anyone in this room who believes in God, those of you who believe in God and who believe that God said something in some book 2,500 years ago, the Bible, right? Y'all can believe what you want to believe, but now we're going to separate ethics, what's right and wrong, from theology. Anyone have a Bible in this room? They can go out the door right now. Follow me? We're separating ethics from theology. We don't have to read that book 2,500 years ago. We don't have to read that to know what's right and wrong. We can sit around a table and figure out what's right and wrong. Do you see what this would mean, the implications for religion, if we're separating ethics from theology? What is the separating ethics from metaphysics? We're all familiar with the study of physics. What is physics? Physics is the study of the world and the laws of this world. Things like the laws of motion and the laws of gravity. That's physics. What is metaphysics? Every time we see meta is from a Greek word which means above. So if it's above the physical world, what's above the physical world? The metaphysical world refers to anything that we can't see or hear, etc. So what's the metaphysical world? The metaphysical world then would be, say, the spiritual world. If you believe in things like God, or the soul, or heaven, these are things that you can't see. Follow me? Those things belong to the realm of metaphysics. God, soul, heaven, all those are metaphysical. Everything in this room is physical. Metaphysical realities include things like God and the soul and heaven and anything else that we can't see or taste or touch in the same way as physical things. So we're going to separate ethics, what's right and wrong, good or bad, from metaphysics and theology. What's going to be fascinating is that in our study of metaphysics, in things like God and the soul and heaven, what's going to happen during the time of the Enlightenment with rationalism and empiricism? Are we going to believe more in these sorts of things or less in these sorts of things? I have a feeling we're going to be believing less in these sorts of things. With empiricism, it's all based on the senses. Can we see and taste and touch God in the same way that we can see and touch the table? No. That's going to lead to some difficulties. Metaphysics is going to start to crumble during the Enlightenment.